This episode's about how we met. I moved in on day 3.
I think I just asked you how much money you have. How much do you have in your savings? Like, you need to invest.
I have to go home. Like, I'm booking a flight today.
That was the moment that you realized that I was interested in you?
I looked at you and you had like a slight tear in your eye.
I don't know if I want to work with you or date you.
Is there a disappear button? Because I would like to press that right now.
So thank you to our friends at Divvy for sponsoring this episode.
Okay.
Well, okay. Wait, this is like real.
So we're doing a podcast.
Okay. We are.
Hello. Welcome to our home.
Why are we doing a podcast?
Because we're narcissists.
You're not supposed to say that on the podcast. That's for the behind the scenes.
No, we want to do a podcast because, well, we've actually been recording our conversations behind the scenes, like just on your phone since we met.
Yeah.
So this has been in the works for a very long time. And we have all of those recordings and we've been looking for someone to help us record because it just like takes a lot of bandwidth. We have like a whole studio set up in our home and we have someone amazing helping us.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we wanted to record a podcast for posterity.
Oh gosh, we're doing the general magic.
I think we have a lot of these conversations offline and we tell them a lot. So I think it's just nice to like have them in a recorded format for us to reference. And then maybe other people will enjoy listening to them too.
Yeah.
Okay. So this episode's about how we met.
Oh gosh. Yes.
And we've told this story so many times. Let's start with where we met in San Francisco. Why were we both there? Because that's actually like we were both there for a very short period of time and we met in a very serendipitous way.
Yeah. So I was living in Buffalo, New York, and I was running a business out of my bedroom. And I was doing that for a very long time to the point where I figured I'm so close to like family that I'm like, I'm never gonna leave Buffalo. Why did I need to? It was a remote business and it was kind of this whole thing where I was comfortable, it was great. And then I essentially got a job offer and they had asked me if I wanted to come and head their team, their CS team in Silicon Valley. And it was one of those things that it's like, I kind of like laughed when I saw it. I'm like, okay, funny. But it was software that I loved that I was just like, hold on, like this is actually, I've been running a business for 8 years now at this point. If there's a time to see what it's like actually running with a startup and being around really smart people, this was the time to do that. So I decided to run with it. And I told all my family that I was leaving Buffalo to go to Silicon Valley. I didn't know what that meant. And it was very emotional and it was jarring to everyone around me. But I did it. I got a plane ticket and that ended up falling through, believe it or not, last minute. But that was after I convinced my brother to sell his business and come join the company and work with me because I was like, okay, I'm going to delegate this. You're going to run the business. And I was like, you know what? I already told my family I'm gone. I emotionally dealt with being gone. So I was like, okay, well, where else can I go? And I was like, well, San Francisco, I can go there because I was close partners with Copper at the time. So I'm like, Copper's headquarters are there. Panadoc's headquarters are there. Dialpad, Slack, like, if I had a reason to go somewhere, it was San Francisco. So, yeah, that's what I did.
I remember when I met you, you were still not committed to leaving Buffalo.
No.
And Evan, which is the friend that kind of introduced us, he takes credit for it, but really it was just serendipity again. He said, I remember you said, I have a ticket, a one-way ticket, but I may go back in May. And this was like February. And Evan was like, no, you're not, man. And you were just like, I don't know. But since we met on that first day, I haven't heard you talk about leaving. So I feel like us meeting kind of like put the nail in the hammer, or sorry, the hammer, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I essentially didn't know where to go in San Francisco. So I reached out to my buddy Evan and I was like, hey, I'm thinking about moving to San Francisco. And he's like, oh, you should stay at Outsite. And I was like, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's a co-living, co-working house. Like I'm staying there. That's where it's like, it's great because there's people there and it's just a good way to go to like a new city and not know people. So I was like, okay, cool. So I moved in the same house as him. And the room's booked up, so he actually had to move out. So I was actually helping him move from this house that was in Pacific Heights over to the house in the Mission in San Francisco. So I was helping him move all of his things. I was actually on the couch and I was working, and he had come over to me, and he was essentially just like, I have to move. I have a lot of stuff. I have because he blows glass, so he had like 4 or 5 suitcases filled with glass that he has blown, and he's like, "All right, I'm gonna grab the Uber and I'm gonna go." And I was like, "Wait, man, like, how are you gonna? You have 5 suitcases. How are you gonna do that?" And he's like, "I'm just gonna like take 3 Ubers." I'm like, "That makes no sense. Let me go shower, and I'll help you move." Like, and he's like, "Okay, sure, yeah." So I got ready, helped him into the Uber. We needed one Uber, obviously. And once we got there, we moved all of his stuff in. And then he had gone into the living room, and I just heard, like, from afar, this girl say, "Are you Mike?" Or was it Mark? "Are you
Matt
Mark?
or
Are you
something,
Matt?"
yeah.
And I just hear Evan be like, "No, I'm not Matt." And then I walk in, and then she asks me, she's like, "Are you Matt?" And I was like, "I could be." And yeah, so that was kind of the first part of where we met. Who was Matt?
So, okay. I'll back up and tell a little bit about what brought me to San Francisco. So, before that, I was living in Melbourne, Australia, and had lived there for 6 years. I grew up in Toronto, so it was like pretty far away. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue living there because it was just so far away from like my mom and dad and family. So, I had sold all my things and decided to do this like solo girl backpacking trip. And I had like a little job stint in San Francisco. I was supposed to be there for 4 weeks for a contract. And I also found Outsite online, and I really liked the idea of being in this like tech city and staying in a co-living co-working house because I thought I'm going to meet such amazing people. I don't want to stay in like a stinky hotel. I definitely have beef with hotels. So I booked it, and funny enough, all the rooms were booked, and I'm glad you said that before I did because the only room I could book was a shared room, and it wasn't a shared room with like all girls. It was like one big room with 3 single beds. And Outside had told me, "Hey, just as a heads up, like no one really books this room. Like just go for it." It was $1,000 cheaper as well. And I was like, "You know what? Let's go for it." Of course, I book it. And then when I show up, they're like, "We've had the busiest month ever. So it's fully booked, and you're going to have 2 roommates that join you, and they're both guys." And I'm like, "Well, you know what? Going to roll with the punches." So on my first night, I met my roommate, the first one that was there, and he was great. He was fine. And anyways, so I was waiting for the third
Mm,
roommate to come in, which was, I think, Matt or Mike. We don't really remember because I didn't really live there very long after that. But I had, on the day we met, had gone on a date in San Francisco with like a random guy that I met. And I just wanted to do the whole like dating in San Francisco thing and kind of tick it off my list. But it was not a good date at all, like to the point where I ended it early and was like, "I want to go home." And he was like, "Do you want to go for dinner?" I was like, "Oh, I'm making dinner with my roommates tonight." So I got home. And if anyone knows what sage is, I had some and I like saged myself after that date. I remember like sitting on the couch, putting my hair up in a ponytail, and was doing the whole like veg out on the couch thing where you're like numbly scrolling through social media, and it just feels so good because you're like now having your introverted time. So that's my point of view. And yeah, I was like kind of nervous, like, who's this extra guy that's going to come live with me? So when I saw Evan come in, of course, I asked him if he's Matt or Mike. And then I had asked you, and none of you were him, but we all started talking
yeah.
and we started chatting. And I asked you what you do for work. And you said,
Yeah. So I said that I work with companies to implement CRMs and automations to streamline their businesses. I think I threw out Copper CRM and Zapier, and you had said, "Oh," like very much like knew what I was talking about. It's like, "Oh, yeah, like I use Entreport," and I'm like, "Wait, hold on, what?" And you knew what Zapier was, and I'm like, "I've never met." There's very few people I've met that even knew what Zapier was. How many women I've met that know where Zapier was? So it's like
living in
no
Buffalo.
one. Yeah, Buffalo, yes, for sure. So it was just like this level, like right out of the gate. You what did you say after?
I said, I have never met anyone who explains what I do for work so well because, sometimes when you're like doing your own thing, you're like trying to always figure out how you communicate to other people what you do. So you had put it in like such a succinct way that I was like, yes, I'm going to steal that.
Yeah,
And,
and you wanted to see my Zapier account, which was also just like, when someone like in a way it's like they're connecting with you and you're like, "Oh, are they just saying this to connect with you?" It was very much like, "No, no, like I want to see what you do because I'm curious." And that is like, wow, there's actually like an interest here beyond just the surface level.
and then we started talking and we were just like so in the depths of the conversation. And Evan was like, I have to Uber back to the other house to
You
get more of
forgot
my
some things,
things.
yeah.
And he was like, so do you want to come with me? Because that was your original plan. And you responded, and you're like, not really.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I like this guy. He's just like straight up honest. And it's always nice when you're enjoying a conversation with someone that it feels mutual. And in
Yeah.
that moment, I felt like, yeah, I was like, he's liking this conversation. So Evan left for like an hour
Yeah.
and he comes back. And somehow we were like at the exact same point of the story
We
you were
like
telling me.
circled back to like at the
It
end
was
to
like
like
the whole life
summarize the
story.
story. And he is like, you guys haven't even changed what you're talking about. Like you're literally right where I left off when I left. Like, yeah. So then everyone kind of started going to bed and like leaving. There was more of a group thing at the start,
Yeah,
and
there's
then it
like,
was like you were sitting on the couch, I was sitting on a chair nearby, and then like by the end, I had sat next to the couch with you, and it was just you and me, and everyone else kind of like just went away, and then we talked for another I don't know 8, 10 hours, like
kind of like this.
yeah,
I remember it was like late, like midnight, 1 a.m. And I was like, okay, he's about to say, like, I'm going home. And you weren't saying that. And I was like, I'm really tired, but I'm also enjoying the
yeah,
conversation. So I was like, I don't even know where this is going. And because we were like really connecting on work and careers and stuff like that, you were like showing me content that you had like put out and I was reading it. And then at one point you pulled out my LinkedIn profile and you're like, let's go through your work history. And I like was so like, this is my person. Like, I just love that.
yeah,
And you're like, tell me about your first job. I was like, well, that was an internship. And we went through like everything that I had done. And then you shared, like, you're like, I only had my own business and I started it when I was 18. And I've been doing this for a very long time. And you were what, 28 or 29 when we met?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I remember being really impressed that you had like the mental stamina to continue running a business because I had met so many people, like, I mean, we all have that, like, you know, it's like they stop after a year or two. And you were like, I didn't make good money off the bat. Like, I made $5,000 in my first year and then 10,000. I mean, I'm making these numbers up. You could probably speak to it more
yeah,
accurately.
5, 5, 10, 10, 15. Like the first 5 years was like less than 10 grand.
And I think so many people would look at that and think like, wow, that sucks. But I was very impressed that you, yeah, like I said, had the strength to just be like, it's not just about like the money. Like you were figuring it out.
Yeah. So that night, okay, so that morning, I guess, because it was
You left
5
at 5.
a.m. So essentially, I got there on 5 p.m. and I left at 5:30 a.m. And I essentially just like took the bus back. Oh gosh, it was sketchy. I should have Ubered back now, looking back at it. But it was just funny. This thing, like, I got off of the bus and I saw there was an ad for like a sauna, like just on like on the bus stop area. And for one thing, this was my first you know, month and a half into SF. So also this culture shock of just like, oh my gosh, like my favorite software tools are like right when I get off of the bus, just there. And we had already had like an inside joke about Asana. So I had taken a picture and like sent it to you. By the way, like this, like after the 12 hours that we were talking, like we hugged each other. It was not like, oh, this was a romantic thing. It was like, I think we can tell that we're both kind of like, there's something interesting here, but it was very much just like no pressure. Um, so we'd gone to sleep, and then I think I texted you in the morning, and I just said like, I think I just said we need to get coffee ASAP.
Yes. So I want to share this because first of all, I don't think we even had time to process like who each other were or what it was or anything, but went to bed. And I had been in a stage where it's like, you don't really know what like guys are thinking. I'll just like fully admit that. So I was like, oh, I had this great conversation with this person till 5 a.m. Watch, I'm not going to hear from him for like
Yeah.
3 days or 4 days. And I was just so over that. And I really like valued people that were like direct and honest. So I had slept in, obviously, and rolled over to my phone, and I saw a notification from you saying, let's get coffee ASAP. So it was just so nice to be like, wow, we're on the same page. Like, it's so
Yeah.
easy. And I was like, absolutely, I'm going to meditate, because I was like super hardcore into meditation then. And I was
You
like,
said you're like, I have to get some work done. But yeah, like if we can meet up around like 1 and actually have it be like a work session, we can get some coffee. Like the boundary there, I'm like, cool, okay. So like you want to hang out, but also you want it to be productive. So it's like cool. And we scheduled to go to a Blue Bottle.
which I want to say, like, that is one of my favorite ways to hang out with people,
Yeah.
like when they're doing like work, because they're doing something that they hopefully enjoy. And I'm doing that. And I was really into what I was doing. So yeah.
Yeah, so we meet up at Blue Bottle, and I think this is funny because like I can say this now, but I didn't learn about this until a year and a half afterward. So we're waiting in line, and I'm like, okay, I'm literally meeting up with this person. We've been talking so much about work, and this is a if there's a work expense that there's ever been a work expense, this is that. So I had pulled out my work credit card, and I'm like, okay, what do you want to drink? And then she says like she wanted, oat milk latte, whatever. I got the same thing, and then I paid with the business credit card, and I'm just like, this is like so obviously a work scenario. We're literally here to work together. And I learn a year and a half later that what was it? That was the moment that you realized that I was interested in you.
Yeah. I was like, he is into me.
And that for
no,
me,
okay. I wasn't that confident. I was like, he might be into me. He's paying for my coffee.
and I'm literally like, this is a work expense. I like that, like I almost feel like if it was more that thing, I'd be like, I'd be paying for you personally. But it was very much like this, like if there's ever been like this clear sign, it's this. So we end up sitting down and we're having coffees, and just believe it or not, Wi-Fi was awful, so we couldn't actually get any work done. Like it literally did not work. So then we just got to a point where we're just like, I guess we're just going to talk to each other. So we just kind of sat there and we talked to each other for maybe like 45 minutes, an hour while we were drinking coffees.
I
And
bullied
then,
you because you didn't have Apple products.
yes,
You didn't have a MacBook. You were on Android. I was like, does this person not know?
yeah,
We'll get into that in
yeah.
another episode.
So thank you to our friends at Divvy for sponsoring this episode. Super excited about this because this is a tool that we've been using for the past 3+ years now. It has helped us automatically reconcile our books and catch fraudulent activity. What was it? It was a virtual credit card that was put on file with one of our vendors.
Yeah. So you can create a virtual card and put it on file with different vendors, and you set a budget for each of your vendors. And we had put one on file, and it got charged at Home Depot and Walmart.
Yes.
And Divvy was super helpful and returned the money to us. And then with our vendor, we were able to say, hey, just so you know,
You were the only vendor that had this credit card. So we know for certain that it was leaked in your possession. They did an internal investigation. And what did they find?
they found that an employee who had been there for 15 years was actually stealing credit card numbers. Apparently, it was the first time, but obviously, big question mark on that. But they were caught. They were let go, of course. And
We helped essentially find them and stop them because they were using other people's credit cards. And just think of a normal business credit card. You use the same credit card number at every single vendor. So if there's fraudulent activity, you have no idea where that stemmed from. But they were actually able to figure out who that person was because they were the only ones with that number.
what blew my mind about Divvy is that it's free.
Yeah.
We don't actually pay for
You
it.
didn't think that. You
No.
thought we've been paying for it for the past year and a half, and you totally like were on board and cool with it. And then I told you one day that it was free, and you did not believe me.
Yeah. So it is a beautiful interface. We use it every single day in our business, every time we have to make a purchase or expense.
Yeah.
So check them out. All the details are down in the description.
Thank you for supporting us in creating this content. So, then it was this cool thing where like toward the end of it, it's like, well, we actually do have to get work done. So I was like, do you want to come back to my place? And by my place, it's literally like, do you want to see the other outside house who there's 12 other people living with me. Like, do you want to go there and work? Because there's co-working areas there. So it's a very like it was an easy way to be like, let's go hang out, whatever else. And she's like, yeah, of course, like that makes sense. So we walked back over there. We sat on the couch and we actually like pulled our laptops out with the intention to work, like to yeah. And then I think we just talked for another like hour and a half or something on the couch.
And somehow the topic of like dating people that you work with came up. And then you just were like, what do you think about that? Like dating someone that you work with. And I was like, I think it's really cool. Like, I really like the idea of like raising a family in an entrepreneurial household. And I shared that I was like, I can see myself like having my 3-year-old on my lap while I'm like writing emails and I'm like just teaching them things about business and work from a very early age. And I don't know if you remember this, and I don't know if you'll ever admit
I
to it,
do. No,
but I
I
looked at
do.
you and you had like a slight tear in your eye.
Yeah, so I grew up, my stepdad was very much in business. All of his friends were in business, so construction company. And I think like I kind of saw like family and business intertwined, and that's one of the things that got my interest into the business world. So I think it connected with that. Like I also had lost my family, left my family. So I think it was just like this whole tying in work and family, being in a new place. It kind of pulled on those heartstrings a little bit, and um, yeah. So I essentially there's a point where I was just like, I don't know if I want to work with you or date you. And what did you say?
Why not both?
And yeah.
And then you kissed me.
Well, so you turned to me and you said, let's talk about it. And I was like,
No, I
okay.
don't think I said that because you were definitely the one who was always better at talking in the early days.
No,
I
I
admire
felt
that
like
about
you were
you.
kind of you at that point you were confident in it because you had already had that idea. We talked for a bit and then I
Okay.
had kissed you. But
I just always love when you're like, let's talk about it. And
yeah,
I'm like, oh, yeah,
yeah,
communication.
yeah.
Okay.
So you ended up going home that night. And then of course we're like, do you want to hang out the next day too?
Yeah, I took an Uber home and then I had to go into the office.
Mm,
And while I was at the office, I decided to do, of course, the customary stalk the person you just met online. So I'm like, Alex Bass, LinkedIn, Alex Bass, Twitter, Alex Bass website. And I'm like sitting there, like just doom scrolling through everything. And I found a tweet that said, Dear Twitter, I met someone incredible. Keep doing your thing. Something of that sort. And I was like, that must be me. And it's so funny
that was after the night. I think on the bus ride back or something. I yeah.
because I've told this story to obviously other people. And I remember someone was like, why would you think that's about you? Like, I would never think that's about me. And I was like, because he had really only been with me. Like, there wasn't that many people
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
could have possibly met in that time. So I was
Forgot.
very
Yeah.
like, I think that's about me. But I didn't reveal to you that I had seen that tweet
Yeah.
for like a week. I
Yeah.
couldn't keep it in that long. And when I told you, you laughed and you're like, oh, shoot.
Yeah. I wasn't trying to hide it. I think in a way, yeah, it definitely it almost felt like it was one of those things for just to put it out there and have it be something to reference back. And yeah, I think it'd be fun to just go back and just look at that tweet. I don't know
I
what, just
have
like
it.
to okay.
I have it
Okay.
screenshotted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were back home, and I think we just realized at this point, like we had obviously talked about so much stuff through because we had spoken maybe a total of 16, 17 hours, 18 hours, like within those first 2 days. So it was literally at the point where I'm like, I feel like I know you better than like even like exes that I've like been with for years.
Hmm.
But we just talked about so much stuff, just like even to the degree of like, yeah, like children and what you envision with that, and like, um, prior relationships and just talking openly about all of the stuff that we've been through. And it was like nothing was off the table. In a way, it was almost like we didn't go on a date. It was like you're getting to know someone as a friend. So then it was nothing was off the table. It was just we just talked openly about everything that we had going on.
And I was doing this thing at the time when I was like trying to be as direct and straightforward about like what I wanted in my life and for my life. And I was like being very selective over the kind of like relationships I wanted to welcome. So I was like waiting for you to opt out at any given point, as in to be like, well, I don't like that. And it doesn't seem like we're going to be a match, which I had done with other people. And it was like very clear we weren't not online, aligned. But with you, everything I shared that was like to me, something that you might not like, you actually liked even more.
Mm.
So that was really nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to day 3.
Yeah.
So went into work again. This was a Tuesday, and you came over after work. We did some work together. I made you some steamed cauliflower and
Did I
broccoli.
show you my Zapier account by this point?
You did not,
Okay.
but you showed me some of the processes you had set up in your
Teaser.
business,
Yeah.
and I remember, like, my eyes watered at that point because, again, I just saw, like, how much, like, you had invested in this business. I think you showed me, like, your QuickBooks account or something like that,
Mhm.
or maybe the integration between Asana
Harvest,
and
tracking time, all the things.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, it was the end of the night, and I think we were kind of like, "What's going on?" Actually trying to recall exactly how this happened. Basically, I think during the day, you had said something like, "No pressure at all, but if you want to move into my house," your house as in, like, the other outside location, "there's, like, a room upstairs that's kind of free." 'Cause
Oh, I think at first I was like, you're essentially we were hanging out. At this point, we were hanging out every day.
well, it was day
There's
3,
well,
but yeah.
it I mean, it was trending toward that, and it was like the clock was ticking down because you actually had to leave. Like, the whole point was you're gonna be gone in, like, 3 weeks. So I think it was like, why essentially have an Uber come and pick you up every night or vice versa or, like, all this just in case, like, I think I said, like, "Why don't you just bring a bag over next time with some of your stuff, like, just in case it makes more sense for you to stay." But then that same day, one of our roommates one of I think they were just leaving for, like, a 3-day thing, and she's like, "My room's gonna be open," and she offered. She was like, "If you know anyone that wants to stay for a few days, like, I don't care, like, whatever, it's just not doing anything." So then I said, "Also, if it makes you more comfortable, you can actually just stay in her room." So it was like, I think they both coincided kind of
Yeah,
thoughts.
and it was actually so I had less than 3 weeks because I had already been in San Francisco by that point for
Mhm.
3 weeks, and then my, like, contract renewed slightly. So, I mean, I was gonna be there for, like, a total of 8 weeks at that point, so 4 more weeks, and I had to get another room, and because they were all booking up and they were quite expensive, it was $2,500 a month, you
Mhm.
were like, "Do you wanna just, like, split a room as well?" I mean, all of this is
I
quite
think
funny
yeah,
because it was
yeah.
very fast, but basically, I decided that night, instead of packing a bag, I was gonna pack all of my things. So I just
Which
went
I didn't
upstairs
know. I
and I
didn't know.
grabbed did you not?
I think you just I think it was like, "Hey, you should just bring a bag next time," and, like, I saw your bag as a big bag, and you're just like, "I brought all my things," and I'm like, "Cool."
Yeah, because I was like, "This is stupid. Why am I, like, gonna Uber home every night?" And like I said, I only had a week left on my, stay, so I was like, "I might as well just if I'm gonna come stay at the other location, I'll
Oh,
do
you
that."
also enjoy the house, like, the people in the house, like, you're building relationships and friendships with people in my house, in the outside house, and I think it's just one of those things where you're like, "Okay, so I'm gonna be going back and living in a room with 2 strangers, or here's this person that I know so well, I could stay." And I think you just had FOMO, like, you didn't wanna miss our house. Our house was great.
Your house was better.
Yeah,
So, long story short, I moved in
yeah,
on day 3. That's
yeah,
how that story
yeah,
goes. I moved in, and the rest is history because we've been together every single day. We've been apart for 2 nights since.
yeah.
The end.
Which
I'm
but
just
no,
kidding.
I feel like there is a level, and maybe this can get cut out if you don't feel comfortable with it, but I feel like even the conversations that we had for us staying in, because there was no pressure of you staying, it was literally like the analytical side of me is like, "This just logically makes sense. You're spending, almost 2 grand a month. I'm spending more than 2 grand a month. Like, why don't we just do this together?" Literally, yes, we'd be sleeping in the same bed, but, like, there's no pressure on it. Like, no pressure to do anything, no pressure to, like, it was literally just like, "Let's just talk about the idea of this because it makes sense, and we want to essentially hang out in the morning and hang out at night anyway." So it literally yeah, it's just we had conversations around everything
Yeah.
very like, literally day number 3, we talked about every facet of everything,
We had an intimacy chat.
which I didn't even know was a thing that exists,
Well,
but
I didn't know either. I made it up because I was
oh,
like, well, like I said, I was at a point in my life where I was, like, trying to communicate a lot more
okay.
about
You seemed
everything.
confident. I was like, "Okay, this is someone that knows what they want and how they want, like, to
Yeah.
talk about
I
things."
remember because I told you I wanted to have an intimacy chat,
Yeah.
and then later, you pulled me aside and you're like, "Okay, let's have the chat." And I was like, "I dig this guy. Like, he is following up on conversations." So we lived together for 3 weeks.
And we were essentially waking up in the morning and listening to a podcast episode while we're getting ready, like literally a business podcast episode. So I like that was just one of the crazy things too, that there was this level where you had a podcast. Oh my gosh, like you had a podcast. I had a podcast. Like there was this, and then we both obviously listen to podcasts. And now we're recording a podcast now. But so it's like, it was this whole thing where we kind of got to both live the same lives that we would live on our own anyway, in a sense, short of like you meditated in the morning. And that was, I guess, difficult to kind of make all that fit in. But
Yeah. And then the pandemic was taking over the world, which, like, I remember my dad calling me and being like, "There's cases in San Francisco." And I was like, at that point, like, "No, no, no, don't tell me this." Like, la, la, la. Like, I just wanted to ignore this pandemic, but it came, obviously, as everybody knows, so fast
yeah,
that, like, within days, things were changing. And there were people who were in our house that lived internationally, like Spain and Australia, and they were dropping off like flies. Like people were booking flights because the borders were closing. And we had decided that we were going to wait it out. And we even went grocery shopping
yeah.
and we went to the grocery store and the shelves were completely empty. And I remember you were like joking around about it. And I was like, this is not really funny. Like, this is actually quite scary.
The part that was so difficult is like when we were in our flow, I think it was just like things were good. This was before COVID, or we had our blinders on a little bit with COVID. But like we would wake up in the morning, listening to podcasts. We would both take like literally the bus to work because we both go downtown. Well, I was working out of Copper's headquarters at this point. Like I had just built such a close relationship with them. And then they had gotten me like a badge to get into the office. They got me on their meal food program. So it was so cool because I was like running my business out of there because our customers were shared. So it was like it made sense. But I had a reason to go downtown. You had a reason to go downtown. And then like after work, the work day, we would like meet up at the bus stop and then we would like take the bus back home. And we were just like in like this, it almost felt surreal, the life that we were living in that short a period of time, but it felt like it's like this is like a tech forward life. Like this is what it would be like if we were living in San Francisco, like together. And we were just in that immediately.
Yeah, which was very new for me as well because I had never lived in a tech city. And at some point during that time, you showed me your Zapier account.
Yeah.
And I remember being blown away because it had like 40 steps, this one automation that you built, and it was like so impressive. And I was like making jokes. I was like, wow, your Zapier account's so big. Your
Yeah.
zaps are so big. Okay, when you know you're joking about, when you have automation jokes,
Yeah.
does that make us nerdy?
Probably.
Okay.
So, okay, so then I was feeling I remember the point where our roommates were moving out. Like a couple of our friends, from Spain, they literally booked a flight to leave, and we're like, this is actually getting serious because they were saying the borders are closing, that we actually need to go back, or we might not even be able to get back into Spain. And I think at that point it was like, okay, this is actually getting quite serious. And I didn't want to give up what we had going there. I'm like, this is just unreal that we're living this life right now. Um, and then, yeah, like the house started just thinning out to the point where it was like me, you, and like four other people. By the way, this is a big house, like 12 rooms, and we had it all to ourselves, literally to the point where the doors were open. You could go to the master bedroom, beautiful shower and everything. And you could like just use it because no one was in there. No one knew. And COVID was like the world was just such a weird thing at that point. But you were saying that your parents were pressuring, like you're not from the US, you don't have health insurance, like you need to get back to Canada.
Yeah, and I had sold my stuff in Australia, so I didn't have a home to go
Yeah.
back to. So the only other home I had was like where my parents were, which was Toronto, and the borders were closing now in Canada. Canada had just announced, and it was on the news, that they were calling their citizens home, and I'm a Canadian citizen.
Mm,
So I remember saying to you, I have to go home. And you were like, when? And I'm like, today. Like,
yeah.
I'm booking a flight today. Like, this has been fun, but I think that, yeah, I have to get back. Like, this is not a joke anymore.
Yeah. So I was essentially, yeah, I didn't want to believe it, but I was just like trying to think, okay, like now this is real. The fact that you're literally talking about booking a flight now. And then my mind is just running and I'm like, okay, well, your family's from Toronto, my family's from Buffalo. Like it's a 2 hour drive away. Like I think I was just like, like, what if I went with you?
And I remember being shocked because I was like, my parents don't even know I'm dating someone. I don't even know what we are. Like, this was supposed to be like a no pressure. I'm moving in for 4 weeks and then I'm going to go travel. So I hadn't like, I think that's a beautiful part of our relationship. Like, there was no overthinking in it because
Yeah.
everything kind of just happened and we were both like present day to day. So I remember being like, well, I guess we said we'd wait out this thing together. Now I'm leaving. I don't know. Fine. If you want to come, why not?
Yeah. Well, I think I was like, my analytical, logical side was just like, yeah, we can't like I think I was like, there's so much money to be made with us being together that this would actually be stupid for us to part ways. The idea of like, let's work together and date, like we were starting the dating thing, but the work together thing was still like it was just an idea and we didn't even know how that would fit together. But I was just like, I know every day we are growing together. We were like watching YouTube videos together and like we were just so engulfed in each other's worlds, but it was in a way that we were growing together so early on. So yeah, it was like, "Why don't I just go with you?" And then it was this whole thing too where it was kind of forced to like, you're essentially be living with your parents, which also was just like I mean, I just wanna preface this, like, I was living at home to 27, and then I got the one-way ticket, so I was literally living in my bedroom in my chi not childhood home because we had moved once, but I went from that to being independent to the point I had never ridden a bus before, public transit, like all these things like that, because it's not great in Buffalo for that. But like I was growing every day in just like the independent side of things. And then I'm now like a month and a half, 2 months into it, like throwing the idea out of going back and living with parents again. Not my parents, your parents. And what were your concerns with me living with your parents?
I mean, I hadn't lived with my parents in 6, 7 years. So I didn't even know like who I was as an adult living at home. And yeah, I just had no idea like what it was gonna be like, but the reality is I didn't have time to think about it. Like,
Mm.
I remember just shooting my parents a text message of a photo of us saying, "Hey, me
Oh,
I
wait,
met a."
wait, it was a photo we had the most amazing roommates. We did a full-fledged photo shoot. They had, like, a beautiful camera, and, like, we just did the goofiest photo shoot, so we had the coolest photos together, and you sent, like I think you were wearing, like, all leopard, I was wearing, like, almost a suit, and you sent, like, the picture over to your parents, and you're like, "I've met a friend here, and he lives in Buffalo. Is there any chance that he could, you know, come with like, would it be fine if, like, he flew back with me or whatever else?" And they're just like, "I don't care, just get home now." And we tried to book something in and we couldn't.
Yeah, like the ticket we found online wasn't booking, so my dad was like, "Oh my god, just send me your friend's passport details and your passport and I'm booking this for you." So we did, and I was like, "This is gonna be a weird way for you to meet my dad, like, he's gonna see you're younger than me." Not that that matters, but I mean, it was a thought.
Well, it's weird where, like, he didn't even know what we were. Obviously, there's some degree where they're gonna be, like, thinking something.
My mom did say she's like, "I knew there was a guy because I, like, stalled on booking the ticket for a couple
Mhm,
hours
mhm,
while we
mhm,
talked
mhm,
things through. She
mhm.
was like, "I knew there was someone."
Okay.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so, I mean, this is the funny thing too that you had spoken to me about you were married in the past, and you're like, "I'm gonna the next person I date, I'm going to want to be with them for at least 2 years before they meet my parents, or before they meet your parents," and this was, 3 weeks into us dating, and I'm now going to not only be meeting your parents, but living with your parents?
Yeah, life had other plans, and
Yeah.
I think that's, like, the one blessing. I mean, there's many, many blessings that came out of COVID, but I think it, like, yeah, forced me to break down the rules that I had. Do you think we would still be together if we hadn't moved back home or my home at that stage?
I mean, I think I would have like, long distance, I was okay with it. My prior relationship was long distance, oddly enough, also Toronto, Buffalo, same kinda scenario, but, I think I would've tried. I don't know what it would've been like, the conversations that we were having, just the things that happen in the day to day, and to be honest, like, we ended up staying in Toronto for a year and a half. I don't know, like, that long of a time being long distance with someone, I don't know. I don't know what would have happened. I would have tried. Like, it was a no-brainer to try the fact of actually moving in with you guys, like but yeah.
Yeah, I think there was a chance because we could have like kept in contact. But I think emotionally, I was like so fragile during those early days of
Mm,
COVID that I would have probably like freaked out and just been like, I can't, I have to just be alone or something like that. Which kind of did happen
yeah.
once we moved in with my parents.
But so we got plane tickets. We went to the airport. This was literally the first so this day, they actually shut the borders from US and Canada. So we did everything. I don't wanna say the perfect time, actually, like, the worst time, but it was early enough that we were able to actually book in the plane tickets. So then we're going in there and they're doing the COVID test type thing. It's not COVID test, but like literally asking you questions of like, did you travel outside of the country within the last 14 days? And do you have a fever and whatever? And they're asking you these questions over like you were somewhere over here. And then someone else came over to ask me these same questions, but they're like, shoot, I don't know the questions I'm supposed to ask you. And then Andra overhears and she's like, oh, you're supposed to ask. And then Andra starts asking me the questions, doing the person's job because they didn't even know what to do. And it's like, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. Okay, fine. So then we're like waiting. And obviously, like everyone's in the state of like, you don't want to touch anything. You want to be careful. We didn't eat anything. We had to get food.
We
And like,
didn't have masks.
it
Like we
was,
had shirts tied
yes,
around our
we didn't.
face
Yes,
because
yes.
they weren't available at that time.
And then, so they're boarding the plane. And here, they're boarding the plane. And then the thing that you don't want to hear when boarding a plane, Alex Bass, can you please come to the front desk? So I go over there. Of course, like your stomach just drops. Like, what is it? I've never in my life had this happen to me. So I went up there and I was like, hi, like what's going on? They said, so we can't let you on the plane. And I was like what? What? And they said, okay, so the borders are officially closed. And I'm saying, like, physically, the computer software is not letting me let you board the plane. And I was like, well, why? And they said, well, because you're a US citizen, you can't just go into Canada. The borders are closed. And I was like, is there any way for me to possibly board this plane? Like, and they said, well, I mean, if your end destination is not Toronto, then I guess if it's a pass through, then that can work. So I was like, okay, so what do I do? Like, do I book another plane flight to get to like Buffalo or something? And they said, I think you came up with the idea, like you can maybe we can do a bus, like one of the like the Greyhound bus things or whatever. So they said, yep, that would work. We just need to put something in the system showing that your end destination is not Toronto because that is technically not legal right now or whatever. So so we went to the corner. Of course, people are boarding the plane. So like the clock is ticking down and I'm like, I don't even know what to do. I've never bought a bus ticket before, like in this way. So I'm going and trying to figure this out. So then I book in the ticket. It was like $35, like non-refundable, all these things like that. And then I show it to the girl and I give her like the number and then she puts it in. She's like, okay, you can board the plane. And it's like, oh my gosh. Like, and we had talked about, I don't need to go on the bus. It's just a matter of getting in was the thing because the system didn't let us in.
I remember it was a $13 bus ticket. I was like, this is
13.
this is a pretty good
Okay.
hack. Yeah. Yeah. So then I guess
Your dad picked us up at the airport.
he picked us up at the airport and I think he was a
Oh,
little bit
you were preparing me. You're like, okay, so my dad, like, he's in IT, and I'm like, it's good. Like, I'm good with parents. This will be great. Like, my background's also in IT. Like, part of the pivot in the business was into managed service provider IT. Like, I'm like, I can connect with it. Like, it'll be fine. Yeah. And then I think like when he had like waved us down or waved you down rather, I didn't yeah, I was like, "Hello?" And it was very, like, he was executional, like, I just need to get my daughter and get her home.
yeah. Yeah, and you were trying to make small talk in the
In the
car
car,
and
yeah.
he was giving you like one word answers.
Yeah.
I mean, I like feel for him
Yeah.
because he was probably in shock.
Oh my
Like the
god.
world's in a pandemic.
Yeah, yeah.
I had gotten a divorce in the previous like year or so or year and a half, whatever it was. And now I'm like have this other person
Person
that
with
I'm
you,
bringing home.
processing that
And he's
too.
like, I have no idea if he's your friend or your boyfriend or what is going on.
Yeah.
And I had no
Yeah.
idea. So I understood where he was coming from, but I remember being in the car being like, is there a disappear button? Because I would like to press that right now.
But we got
Yeah.
to your house, and what did he ask you?
Yeah. Like when you were downstairs or something, he was like, so do you guys need separate rooms or the same room? And I was like, the same. And he was like, so what are you guys? And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, he's like, are you serious? I'm like, as serious as you can be with someone you met 3 weeks
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
So
And from there, Yeah, a year and a half. I mean, there was just so much that happened during that year and a
I mean,
half.
even to the point of like, because now I was in Canada and the US Canadian agreement is like you can stay in from the US citizen, stay in Canada for 6 months max out of a year. So then it started like that. We thought that COVID might just be a 2, 3 month thing. We even had like a dinner chat of like, how long do you think COVID's going to last? And like, I think the longest point, I think your dad had said the longest point, but even that was not as long as it lasted. And I actually got to the point where I'm like, shoot, I actually need to file with the Canadian government to get like a visa. Like, what is going on? Because the problem was since the borders were closed, if I went to the US, I would never be able to get back into Canada until COVID was over, whatever was going on with that. So there was this whole government thing that was going to keep us apart if we had left each other. It's like you leave, you're not coming back in. And that was the state that we were in. So then I was like, I'm filing for a visa. Are they going to give me a visa? Oh, it was so backlog, didn't hear from them. I asked, of course, can I just stay through the end of the year, which would be a 12-month thing through December? Well, when it becomes November and you're like, we still haven't heard back from them, then that would mean that in December, if I stayed past that, I would be illegally in Canada. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? So then I filed again, and you have to pay like $100. So then I like paid again, and I'm like, I don't even know if they've got my first one, like whatever. And I'm just like every day was waiting to hear back from the government because at any day they can literally say that you can't be here, and I would just have to leave. I would just have to go back to the U.S. And then the question too is, when do we get to see each other again?
Yeah, that was a big stress on our relationship. We both were like totally in the gray. And you're like paying for health insurance in the
Oh,
US, but some
oh
like
yeah.
health stuff came up. So you were like paying doctors in Canada and you're like, I feel like this is the
Double. I'm paying
ultimate
like six
just
because it's self-employed, like literally paying 6, 7 grand a year on health insurance. I'm like, I can't use any of this, and I'm paying out of pocket. I think one of the doctors was like, I needed an appointment, and they had said like, we only take cash, and I'm like, I don't have cash. We had to go to an ATM. You had to take cash out, and I'm like, this is also so sketchy that they're making me pay in cash. Like, what is going on?
yeah.
So that was a rough year.
Yeah. But through that, we started working together,
Trialing, yeah.
trialing it. So we had obviously focused like I'd say the first year on our relationship mainly, but there were because we were in a common line of work, like I had clients and you had clients, and there was just some crossover that started happening, and we would like discuss all of our client problems together
Yeah.
and work through things. And
It's like,
that
"Oh, this
was
could be solved with automation." Like, "Oh, let me show you." And
and
yeah,
you dove into like
yeah,
some of my clients and you like just built some kick-ass automations. Like I remember just being like, wow, I'm like really impressed. And like my business partner at the time, I remember he was like, I want to marry Alex. I was like,
which
I
it's I mean,
understand.
it's also, like, one of the things that I appreciate so much about the relationship is that when you can give something to your partner that in a way is, like, it's the thing that you're interested in, and it's also a skill that you have, like, that feels rare. So to be able to literally in a way, you said what you built was amazing. It's like, I remember in that instance, that was like a 5, 10 minute thing for me, but it had taken so long to get to that point. And the fact that like you were both impressed and appreciative and all the things, like how cool is that in a relationship to be able to give your partner that? And it overlaps monetary side of things too. Like it's just it was really cool.
Yeah. Speaking of things of giving to me, we won't go into the full story here. Save this for another day. But one thing that you got me was a superhuman subscription. And I remember being like, this is just such an awesome gift. Like, we have so many friends that like gifts as their love language. That's not one of my top love languages at all, but that was like a cool thing because you really loved Superhuman and you
Yeah.
introduced me to them. And yeah, I remember you paying for my annual subscription, and I was like, what a relationship
Yeah.
perk.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we are gonna do our next episode about how we made our first investment together. But I want to wrap this one up to kind of just take people through the journey a year and a half in COVID together. And then we got vaccinated. And then we were at a point where we were like, we need to get out of Toronto or Canada.
Yeah.
Like we both knew we really weren't going to live there long term.
We miss San Francisco. Like, the life that we had there was something that I think we both just, like, yearned to get back, and
Yeah.
that just delayed a year and a half.
We wanted to be in a tech hub, and for
Yeah.
you especially, I think being in Canada, there was just so many limitations, like, you couldn't
Even
get
like
access to
VPN,
software,
yeah.
that you wanted because it wasn't available in Canada, or you couldn't get things shipped, or you would have to pay, like, I think, like, more taxes and
Yeah,
duties.
yeah,
So you were just like, "What is
yeah,
this?"
yeah.
And I remember being like, "Yeah, this is my whole childhood. You just see all the commercials on TV about all the things that are available in the States, but you can't get them here." So
I mean, this was also the investing side of things, like, in the market, because I had realized how easy it was for me
oh,
to invest in the stock market and how, like, for you to buy US companies, you'd have to convert Canadian dollars to US dollars and pay a fee on that and then convert back and all this stuff like that. So, 6 months into, like, knowing each other and dating, I remember literally just I mean, I'm more open to talking about money and things like that. I think I had just asked you how much money you have and is it invested? Maybe I started with like, is your money invested? And you're like, no, it's in savings. And then I'm like, in this level, like if you're like, cool, I have like 2 grand in savings, and it's like whatever. But I was like, wait, how much do you have in your savings? And then I was like, you need to invest. Like you need to invest.
yeah. I remember you, like, kind of you had shown me your net worth and, like, all your bank accounts, and then, like,
Well, I was showing you the company revenue, like all that
you were
stuff. It's just
being
like I'm
very
open like to
yeah.
the journey and growth and all the things.
You're being very transparent, and
Yeah.
I was not used to that because in, like, my previous relationships, there was just not that openness around money, and I think, like, for most people, there's just not that level of openness, so it was new for me, and I remember, like, I'm like, "I bet you he wants to know my, like, net worth," but I wasn't saying it, and then, like, you, like, trickled it in, like,
Yeah.
planted seeds until one day I remember at the kitchen table, you're like, "So what's your net worth? How much money do you have?" And I told you, and you're like, "We need a plan." And
Yeah.
I was like, "What do you mean?" And you're like, "All right, we need to get you to start investing." And I had money like in Canada and Australia.
Oh
And you're like, "We
gosh.
got to get you to transfer it." And the truth is, like, I love that this podcast is about angel investing and um, finances in a way. Well, not
Yeah.
really, but you had really, like, started me on that journey of becoming more financially literate. And yeah, in a way, it's a shame that it took meeting you to even get to that point. But yeah, we started having a lot of conversations around money and investing. And you were, like, so patient with teaching me. I remember you brought out a graph of the stock market because I was like, what if I lose my money? And you're like, what is the trend? Do you see that even in, like, the worst point here compared to where we are now, it's all trending upwards. So if you hold for long enough, like, you're going to get uh, like, more returns. And
Yeah.
you started teaching me about building wealth. And that was, yeah, really, like, eye opening and really the beginning of our angel investing journey. And then obviously that helps with the business as well, because when you have a business together, like, money is right in the center of it. You have to
Yeah.
talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we went, just to wrap up the story, we left Canada and we went to Buffalo. We spent a few months in Buffalo meeting your family for the first
Well, the
time.
border, so we get to the border,
Oh, yeah.
and it was this thing where we genuinely obviously building this up, we toyed with the idea for many months of, like, maybe we can both just walk over the border together, like, maybe there's a chance that they would let this happen. So what you did was what we had learned was you can fly into the US if you're a Canadian citizen, but you can't drive or
You can't cross the
cross the
border.
land border,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
So what you did was you spent $1,000 on a plane ticket that should have been 150, whatever, to go from Toronto to Buffalo, and it was in a way a backup if that plan didn't work, and part of us were like, "Maybe, like, it's fine." And the plane ticket was also from Toronto to Chicago to somewhere else to Buffalo. There's no direct flight because all the stuff with COVID, and they were shutting a lot of the planes down and stuff like that. So it was a 16, 17, 18-hour flight that you're gonna embark on, and here I am just gonna, like, walk over the border. So we walk over the border. It's so nerve-wracking, you and me just walking over the border together, and then there's the US Border Patrol, and they asked, like, country of origin, whatever. I said US, and they asked you, said Canada, and then he's like, "You can't come over." And he was just, like, stern, and it's like, is there any way, like, we've been living together, like, we're what is the whole thing where it's like if you're living together over a year, then maybe
Spousal
you're like
equivalent or
spousal
whatever,
equivalent,
common law.
common law,
He's
yeah.
like,
And then
no.
and he laughed. It's like, no, like it does not work that way. And then he was short of
Well, he said, "Are you married?" And we're
I
like,
s-
"No."
But could
And
we like
and you're
could
like, "Can we get
can we get
married?"
married here? They were not having any of the
He
joke
was
like,
so annoyed. He was like,
yeah,
"Who's gonna marry you
yeah,
here?" Like,
yeah,
and yeah, basically I was like, "Take my
yeah,
suitcase." I pushed it off to you. I gave you a hug. I remember you like tried to like do an emotional, like you asked him for a minute and I was like, "No, I'm seeing you
yeah,
tomorrow," because I like did not by that point, like we had been so
yeah,
attached for
yeah.
like a year and a half and you were
I
my
figured there would be some way that he would just be like, "Okay, okay, go," and it was very much no. He had no
no.
yeah,
Possible, but no.
no.
And yeah, I just knew that I wanted to like I didn't want to not have you in my life or like be with you at that point. So it was a bit tough for me like driving back home,
Mm.
even though I knew I was going to get on a plane tomorrow,
Which
the
there
next
was a
day.
level that we didn't know if that would even work,
I mean,
like,
that was so there's just so much anxiety. You had to have like a negative COVID test and
"Oh,
all
they
these
almost didn't
other
let you back
things.
into Canada." You were in a weird sit no, they almost made you,
Quarantine.
quarantine for 2 weeks, and then that would've made you miss the plane flight, but luckily because you proved that you had your COVID vaccine, they
Yes.
let you back into the country without quarantine, and all you had done is just walked the land border and then walked right back on the same bridge, and they were literally like, all these things could have gone wrong that we didn't even know could happen. So then your parents essentially you guys drove back, and then the next day you jumped on the flight in the morning, and 17, 16 hours later on plane flights, you were in Buffalo.
You and your brother picked me up. I remember seeing Bobby, your brother, for the first time
Yeah,
being like, "Oh, I've like met you over so
yeah,
many Zoom or whatever Google Meet
yeah.
calls." And yeah, I met all your family, which was amazing. And then we were thinking about where we were going to live. So we both wanted a tech hub. So Buffalo was not part of that. And you had already left. So
Mhm.
we were like, let's go back to San Francisco. And when we did, we booked like a 3 month stay at Outsite where we
Yeah.
first met. And the city had just changed. I think like most people listening that know anything about San Francisco would understand what we mean by that. But it was just like not safe. Definitely sketchy is the best word to describe it.
Yeah.
And yeah, as much as like we had fun during that time, like it didn't feel like home. And for me, moving to the US, it just didn't feel like a place I wanted to like raise kids or grow roots or anything like that.
Could we just say that I mean, the plan was to go back to SF to try to pick things up where they left off, and we were living with my brother for 3 months during that time period, and he had started getting into engineering, and, he was job interviewing when we were living with him and stuff like that, and he got a job, and, 2, 3 weeks after that, we were gonna be leaving and going to San Francisco, and he had just seen like, we had all these stories of all these things happening, and he's just like, "I think I wanna go to, like, San Francisco, I wanna visit or something." And he just convinced himself to, "Maybe I should just sell my house and come with you guys and do digital nomad." So within, like, a 2-week time period, he decided to sell his house to come with us to San Francisco together, and we essentially did the outside thing with him in San Francisco.
Yeah, that was the best.
Yeah,
I remember being like, "Do you need like time to plan?" And he's like, "No, I'm ready."
yeah,
He was like, "All right, let's go." Yeah, that was cool. And now he's moving to Austin.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
So yeah, we wrapped up our time in San Francisco now, went back to Buffalo for the holidays, and then we were like, let's try Austin as a
yeah.
city. And that's where we still live today. And we got here, and within the first day, it was January at the time, which was freezing cold in Buffalo.
Mm-mm.
And we got here, and it was like,
It was like
probably
70.
69, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
70. Like, I was wearing a jacket, and we went to Manana on South Congress for coffee, and we sat on the patio, and we met our friend David, who
One
was
of my
living here.
close friends from Buffalo, like, he was also tentatively, like, living in Austin. So, it's like this Buffalo friend that I'm used to hanging out with in Buffalo that, like, is in the CRM space. He meets up with us, like, our first day in Austin, and it's just like, "What is going on?" Like, this like, it just, like, felt like home so quickly in a way.
Very quickly, and we actually knew a few people that were living in Austin, and then we were meeting with them, like Emma was here, and
Mm,
then we met with her, and there was just, like, familiar
yeah,
faces, and for me, for that coupled with the good coffee at Mañana, coupled with the sunshine in
yeah.
January, was like, "I like Austin, and I can see myself living here." It is very close to it's the closest American city to Melbourne, which is what I wanted because I really liked living in Melbourne. It was just way too far.
Mm.
So coming to Austin felt like home very quickly for me. And I was so happy that I found a US city that I felt like home in because I wasn't sure if I would.
Oh, you were sold after that first day, and then you
Yeah.
had asked me, or you were like, "What do you think?" Like, expecting me to be like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing too." Everything. I was like, "It's been a day. I need to see what the people are like." Like, I loved SF because of the people there and the relationships and the tech and everything. I'm like, I don't know what that's like here yet. So you were sold on it immediately. I think it took 2 weeks time or so because we met a lot of great people, and it's like, yeah, I think this is the place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So I think this wraps up our first episode.
yeah, yeah,
So, next episode, we're going to go into more detail about our first investment in motion and also how you asked me to marry you.
yeah. Not the traditional way that most people do.
So, stay tuned.
Uh,
And yeah, high five. We did it.
yeah.
We could air a high five.
So it's like, is this the time to angel invest? But even the scary stuff that I'm like, oh my gosh, like, are we getting scammed? This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Is there any chance that you would actually be open to getting married so that we can invest?